Good morning. I'm Rosemary Pena, President of the Black German Heritage and Research Association, and Adjunct Professor of German Studies at the University of British Columbia at Vancouver. Our conversation today is the 24th in the BGHRA's All Black Lives Matter series. My colleague, Emily Fraser-Rath, and I, and our students here at Davidson College are pleased to welcome John Kantara into our virtual classroom. We are also delighted that Sonia Donaldson, our discussant at last week's public event, is also able to join us. We look forward to continuing the conversation begun on Friday, but most importantly, engaging with our students' questions for John. But before we begin, Emily will formally introduce our guest and share a bit about our class and our students before turning the program over to them and our special guest. Emily?
Thank you, Rosemary. My name is Emily Fraser-Rath, and I'm a visiting assistant professor of German Studies at Davidson College, located just north of Charlotte, North Carolina. I'm also the executive director of the BGHRA. We are so excited to be able to invite John Cantara and also Dr. Sonia Donaldson to our class, to Davidson College, and to the BGHRA today. Today is February 8th, 2022, and we, Dr. Pena, me, and most importantly, our incredible Davidson students are in our third official week together. Last semester's students in Black German Art and Resistance, or German 231, finished out the semester by completing incredible projects, including podcasts, a music video, scholarly essays, and even a song. As they reflected on our conversations with our guests and on the questions raised throughout the class, please go to our website, www.bghra.org, and click on BGHRA at Davidson and explore the work of our former students. This semester, Dr. Pena and I are so pleased to have another opportunity to work with Davidson students as we co-teach our second course together. German 351, or Race, Gender, Migration, asks us to employ a critical lens informed by Black German studies to questions of migration, belonging, and identity. As these big human topics intersect with Germany, Austria, and Switzerland, with the German-speaking world, and with the lives and experiences of the global Black German community. The class, like its predecessor, consists of three parts. It is first an exploration of the aforementioned themes, as they are or could be handled in the field of Black German studies. Second, it is a community-based learning course as we support the BGHRA through our work and will feature our final projects on the BGHRA archive. And third, it is, most importantly, an opportunity for students and through these recordings, our broader BGHRA and Davidson communities to speak with people whose lives and work intersect with, influence, shape, and inform Black German studies. This series would not be possible without the generous support of the Dean Rusk International Studies Program Speakers Fund here at Davidson and the interim director of the Dean Rusk program, Dr. Vera Case, as well as its program administrator, Meg Zweifel, which I'm seeing as a German last name, but it's not German, but I can't not say it as a German last name. I also cannot ever thank Meg Sawicki, our German Studies Department administrator, enough for all of her support, encouragement, and organization that truly has kept us going and remains a vital part of what we are doing. So to the Megs and to Verna, thank you. Before Dr. Pena and I fade into the background and turn things over to John Cantara, Dr. Donaldson, and our wonderful students, I'd like to take a moment to introduce our guest. John Cantara was born in 1964 in Bonn, Germany, and was drafted as a medic to the German Navy in 1984. After completing his degree in political science at the Free University Berlin, Freie Universität, in 1991, and completing a postdoc in international journalism at the City University in London, England, he worked for 7 years as a reporter for Die Zeit TV. Since 2000, he has worked as a freelance documentary filmmaker, specializing in science and technology documentaries. Throughout this time, Cantara has produced more than 70 TV documentaries and reportages for ZDF, Art, Dreisat, and ARD on topics ranging from race, politics, war and conflicts, to economics and culture. And he's done this all over the world, including war-torn Iraq, Bosnia and Herzegovina, and Mali. Cantara has won numerous awards for his work, including an award for his print journalism by the German Academy for Technological Sciences in 2007, the prestigious Georg von Holtzbrinck Award for Science Journalism for his TV documentaries in 2012, and the prize in critical journalism for his ARD documentary Killing via Joystick, the Drone War and its Consequences in 2013. In addition to his work as a filmmaker, Cantara is also professor of journalism at Dekra Hochschule für Medien at the University of Applied Sciences in Berlin. In addition to all of his films and work thus far, including the documentaries Afro Talk and Die Macht der Vorurteile, or The Power of Prejudice, which we've watched in preparation for today's conversation, we can look forward to 3 one-hour documentaries that will come out soon on topics ranging from black holes and the role they play for the development of life to conspiracy theories. I'm really looking forward to both. Welcome to both John and to Sonia and to our students. And now I'll turn the mic over, as it were, to all of you.
Thank you so much. Wow, that was an introduction. Yeah, well, thank you for being here and you know, that we can speak together. I mean, great to have a class like you. I mean, how many of you actually speak German? 1, 2, wow, that's cool. Yeah, you know, usually you don't see people or students in America who can, you know, speak German or have heard of German, or, you know, it's very seldom for me to actually engage with young people from the States who do speak my mother tongue, you know. So usually the other way around, I have to get all my English out of my head in order to speak to you guys. But it's cool. Das finde ich sehr schön. Ja, jetzt können wir ja alles wunderbar auf Deutsch machen. But I really think what you need to do is come over and make the jump over the pond and come to Germany and explore our country, because it is not as big as the US, but it's beautiful and has interesting people. And of course, you know, when you come to Berlin, it's the most exciting city in all of Europe. Yeah, so I expect you to come over and then we have a beer. Yeah, I think when you're 18 in Germany, you can, no, actually when you're 16 in Germany, you can have a beer. That's, I think for some of you guys, pretty exciting, because who is not allowed to drink alcohol before 21 in your cases? How many people? You live in where, Bryla? Where do you live?
Well, in all of the United States, we're not allowed to drink before 21. I'm only 20.
Wow, I thought in only in some states.
No,
because I was in Florida, I was even ID'd, you know, and I thought, wow, flattering. But it's crazy, huh? Sometimes how countries are completely different. In Germany, it's completely normal for a student, you know, when you're 16 to have a beer. That's not a problem. Not hard liquor, but have a beer, that's no problem. But in the US, you can go to war when you're 17 or 18, but you can't have a drink. So completely different cultures, right? And so when you go to places and live in other countries and you learn languages, you understand the world a bit better, you know. So I think it's really, really important that you choose a language as one of your majors to study, whether it's German or Italian or French, you know, a European language. You can do a great deal with that. And it's obviously really exciting when you are you know, 17, 18, 20, and you go on in another country and start to live there. Yesterday, I was actually talking to students at the Hertie School of Governance here in Berlin, and among them quite a few Americans who were still picking up the language. So, you know, you have an advantage. You already, you know, mastered at least a little bit of the language, you know, and when you come to Germany, no time, you will learn it. Yeah, and it's really cool to be able to then converse with you all in my mother tongue. So it's really cool. Yeah, I mean, what I wanted to say is that I'm happy to be here and answer all your questions. So, you know, if you have questions for me, shoot. That's it.
Awesome. Well, welcome. We're so happy to have you. Who
Cool.
wants to go first? You all have such good questions. Go for it, Brenda.
Well, yeah, I'm Brayla. Thank you so much for being here. We're really excited to have you. After watching your lecture on Friday, you talked a little bit about why you thought doing journalism work was really important. Talking about like getting a plurality of different stories, I think is how you said it, which I found very interesting. So I guess my question would be, how do you navigate like the ethics of journalism, especially when you're talking to minority voices, and a lot of the times you're asking people to share stories about their traumas? So what kind of like difficulties have you had in navigating ethical journalism?
Ooh, that's a very, very good question, and straight to the heart of one of the major problems you have as a journalist is how to deal with it. But I can give you maybe a little example, which has to do with preconceived ideas, you know, every human being has. For instance, myself, I was sent to the US to do a story about Megan's Law. I'm not sure whether you know about that law, but it's a law which came about when a 9-year-old Megan Kanker was brutally murdered by her next door neighbor, Jesse Timendakwas, who was basically raped the little girl, killed her, and dumped her body in a park. Horrible story, horrible. And in consequence, her mother, Maureen Kanker from New Jersey, basically ran a grassroots campaign to say that the state should come up with a law informing communities when a sexual offender is released from prison and wants to live in their communities, so that they know if there is a predator somewhere. And at first you think, sure, I want to know if somebody like this with a predisposition like that lives close to me. But then you think, okay, the guy has served his time. There is at least the idea of rehabilitation. So if you serve your time, you are usually, when you're not a threat to the community, you're allowed to go back into the community and start your life anew. So that's at least is the theory. Now, here comes in Maureen Kanker and says, this is too dangerous. These people are not really, someone who is actually violating a child is brought back into our community. He's a risk to our children. And she was right. Jesse Timendakwas was a repeat offender. So, but what did she ask for? She said, we not only want to know who is coming to our community, or maybe let the sheriff or the local police enforcement know who comes into the community. We want to have open discussion, So the law was actually passed first in New Jersey, and I think now in a lot of other states in the United States. And she won the victory. Now in New Jersey, it's the law that if a sexual offender is released, they have a prison there in Evenil, I think, 500, sex offenders in one prison. I went there, and they, if he's released, there is going to be a discussion in the local community. Everybody knows where he's moving. Everybody knows who's his employer. Everybody knows who's his number plate on the car. His photo is being published. So in effect, there's no way that somebody is going to, come into that community. And if more and more Megan laws are there, these people, after they are released, have no place to go. They're unemployable. They will be ostracized their whole life. They can actually kill themselves. So coming from Europe, I said, typical Americans, how can they do that? This is, you can't do that, and I had the preconceived idea in my head, I'm going to do a story about that. And I called Maureen Kanker, and I actually went to her home. And but before I went there, I spoke to a sex offender, someone who actually molested his two children, his two boys, and was caught, put in Avenel prison, served his time, went through therapy, and wanted to go back into his community. And that was before New Jersey passed Megan's law. And he was living next to a police captain who didn't know that he had a record, or that record. So he said, this is terrible. I have to leave my job. I have to leave my community. I can't reintegrate into community because of what I've done and I served my time for. Yeah. So I had that already filmed, and then I went to the house of Maureen Kanker. And there I was sitting on the sofa next to this lady who had lost her child to a repeat sexual offender. And she told me her story, and everything I had in mind about, these Americans crumbled. In the end, I was sitting on the sofa crying because it was such a terrible story. She was crying, I was crying. I said, how on earth am I going to do a story about that? Somebody is printing at my home, so don't worry that somebody's coming in there. Josh, excuse me. Sorry. That's my son. He's 20, so your age. We're all connected in this house, Wi-Fi, and it's my laser printer here. So, anyways, you know what I mean. Anyways, it was really difficult for me to do certain, to be right and to do right to her story, and so I just focused on what my job is. Report the story as it is. Do not come to your own conclusions. That's not the job. The job was report what is. And that's what I did, but it was heart-wrenching because in a way I could understand that man who had served his time and was trying to reintegrate and become a viable person, member of the community again, and who, the rug under his feet was pulled away by Megan's law. And still, Jesse Timendek was a repeat offender, and clearly something did not work, at least for Megan Kanker. She's dead, and she was 9. So how do I, as a reporter, you're confronted often with heart-wrenching, really terrible stories, and how do you actually deal with them? not to do any injustice to Marine Kanker or to this other guy, I think our duty is then to report what is, to just state the facts, explain to your viewers what has happened, and then they have to make their own mind up and say, I lean towards this or towards that. But I realized that my preconceived ideas, when I was sitting next to that lady on that sofa, talking to her, I was just no longer the European journalist going there. I was just crumbling, and I thought, oh my goodness. I knew that she lost her girl. Was the reason why I was interviewing her. But it really, my goodness. And now at that time I had no children. Now I have children. My boy is 20, my girl is 16. And so, this is the most horrible thing which could happen to a parent. This is really difficult. So Braila, that is a very tough question. You want to be able to function as a journalist, to do your job, but you want to be honest and don't do a disservice to the parties involved. So get your balance right. That takes guts, and it is not good to then jump on it and do your own, bring your own self in there, because that's not your job. Your job is to report what is. There are sometimes segments in journalism where you do have your own opinion, and that is, on the opinion pages, is clearly signed. It's an opinion. Washington Post, I just read this morning, the opinion pages, or New York Times, you have big opinion pages there. That's clearly stated, and a variety of opinions, pro, contra, any issue, or different kinds of ideas, where you can read it and look at it and say, okay, I lean more to this, or I lean more to that, and that's what I mean with plurality, that you don't have just one way of looking at things, but you have a plurality of ways of looking at any given not only in journalism. Wait a minute. The same ethics should apply to in scholarship. Thank you, John. Yeah, of course. You have to balance it out and look for all kinds of sides in this equation. Yeah. In an equation in mathematics, you have both sides, and you can solve the equation from each side. You have to look at both sides always. Yeah, Prela, did I kind of answer your question?
Yes, thank you very much.
If you have another one, follow up, shoot.
Did you end up producing a documentary on this, or was it just an article about the
No, it's actually a film. It is a magazine format film I did when I was a reporter for Die Zeit TV. So that is maybe 8 minutes or something like that. So you could do an hour program on that, and I'm sure somebody has done a documentary about Marine Kanker, because she's a tough woman, and she's a really tough woman to get through this. No, I want to do this for my girl, and she did, So she basically, I think all over the United States you have Megan's laws. But the question still lingers, what do you do with all these people in prisons who are sexual offenders who come back into society? How do you deal with them? You can't shoot them. So I'm sure there are quite a few people who say, yeah, you shoot them, but that's not the penalty they receive. They didn't, and the death penalty, in your country, we don't have the death penalty, but in your country, you have too many cases where just justice was wrong and you killed the wrong person. Or put them behind bars for 30, 40 years and then realized, oh, sorry, we got the wrong one. So capital punishment is always a really difficult thing, but what do you do? How do you deal with these people? That's something which is not solved yet. Yeah. Sorry, Duncan, you want to say something?
So in a follow-up to your point about the importance of balanced journalism, do you think that's a skill that's being lost in today's more divided times where everyone wants to absorb their own opinion essentially in their news rather than a balanced form of reporting?
Good question. I mean, sometimes when I watch cable news, yeah, I really think, okay, you know, that's not journalism. It's a slugfest or whatever it is. You know, it's kind of you know, wow, it's only opinion. This is not journalism. Journalism is, the news should not have the opinion of the reporter in it at all. Who did what, when, where, and why, the 5 W's. You know, that's the first thing you learn in journalism school. In the first paragraph of your writing, there should be everything in there. And then, you know, you heard, I'm sure you heard it, invertive, like this. No, this, invertive pyramid. So, you know, in the first paragraph, everything is in the news story so that you can cut and edit for you know, for length from the bottom up. So these are, you know, easy, normal basics in journalism. And when you look at journalism today, particularly in the United States, I think in a lot of news copy, you don't see that anymore. You know, and that is lack of editorial control, lack of editorial rigor. You know, you have to train your journalists properly, that they know what they're doing. And but it is all, you know, ratings driven, or, you know, if you know, what's this guy called, Joe Rogan, you know, on Spotify, $100 million contract. Wow, for a loudmouth. I mean, somebody who can really shout. He's a comedian, you know. This guy ain't a journalist. He's not a journalist. He's got no journalistic qualifications at all. He's loud, and he's, you know, he's very loud, and he can bump his breast and say, "Hey, here, I'm the biggest gorilla on the block." But that's not journalism. So, in terms for me, it is really important that you follow journalistic ethics and standards. You know, I mean, there's a reason why you go through journalism school to get a degree to be a journalist. Unfortunately, at least in my country, everybody can call himself a journalist. You know, and people not necessarily ask questions. Do you have the qualifications to be one? If you say I'm an eye doctor, you know, everybody will ask you for your certificate, you know, for, hey, before they let you operate on your eyes, Duncan, you know, so you want to know whether your doc is really a doctor. But with journalists, we assume that, you know, everybody who can write juicy copy has all the tools to be a good journalist. No, it's not the case. So yes, you have brilliant newspapers. I read the Washington Post. I read the New York Times. I read the best newspaper I can think of is The Economist. The London Economist is really a great newspaper. In Germany, we have Die Zeit. We have Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung. We have really good established newspapers in print, in radio, in television. We have all of that. But everything is being drowned out by social media. You know, I guess I Twittered once today, yeah? So that's not a lot for a lot of people. But you see, you have to follow Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. I mean, look who am I talking to? You all use that. Who is then, you know, still taking the time to read a long form article, which takes you maybe 10 minutes? Once in my journalism class, I had a long piece of Decide to Read for Everyone. And I gave that out. I printed this big broadsheets, you know, and I gave it to every student. So we read it now in class, and then we discuss. And I was reading it again because I read it before, but I read it again, and right in the middle of the article, somebody shouted, "Oh man, this is the longest piece of news or article I've ever read in my whole life." And I was thinking, wait a minute, we were just reading for 5 minutes. What's going on, you know? But that is, for quite a few people, I observe, maybe I'm wrong, but you tell me, in your age bracket, it's hard to read, you know, anything longer than a Twitter feed. So sorry, I'm teasing you now. You know, you should protest and say, no, we read lots of things. But what I think is, you know, if you have a long article, we lose skills of reading a piece of paper. And we you know, when was the last time you've written a letter by hand? Can you do that? How does the letter look like? Can you do that without a spelling mistake? Or you used to use your keyboards. Okay, oh no, I have to go back. I do that myself, but still, can we actually write a letter by hand? And how, if you compare text you would write with a keyboard and text you write by hand, does the content change? You know, does it change? Do you think differently? Is there, you know, try it. I bet you'll realize there's something changing. Yeah, you think in a different way because you type things, you formulate your thoughts with a typewriter or a keyboard, you know, and you go back and say, I have to, I go back to the front of it, and then you change the paragraph, the first paragraph, and then you go back and then you read it again. And in the old days, you had to do the whole thing again, you know, and that means that you concentrate in a different way. Mm-hmm. So I think the technology is changing the way we receive and digest information, and it's changed how we write things or do things. So I to your question, Duncan, it is really a problem now to find good unbiased information, and it's you have to pay premium dollar to do that, because, you know, the New York Times, for instance, I would say is still a flagship of good journalism in the world. It is actually giving you they have the resources to give you the best journalists. One example, I think the New York Times has something around 1,000 journalists, or a little more than that, but something around that. Only 30% of them are actually writing copy with their byline on it. You know, the rest is fact-checking. I mean, the fact-checking segment of journalism, which is one of the major things we have to do as journalists, to make sure that the information we provide and disseminate is correct, is done by most, you know, most journalists are only doing this, checking their colleagues. Because when you realize you have in the New York Times, for instance, somebody who just invents his stories, we had that several times, you know, it is such a scandal. It is such a blemish on the reputation of the paper. They can't afford that. So they're investing heavily in factual information, to check the information they're bringing out, to use two sources, you know, and not say, you know, just publish hearsay. oh, this and that guy told me that, you know, so, but corroborate information. So you have a lot of, there are some good examples of journalism still out there, but they're drowned out by very loud, you know, people who pose as journalists who are not really journalists, and yeah, that's a problem in the end. And you because you rely on bright minds like you to look through this and see, you know, with your own eyes, what is good and what is not good. You have to have that capacity.
So John, I think this actually goes to the question that Sonia posed in the chat. How do you understand the idea of the democratization of the internet, which allows marginalized voices to be heard, right? We have spaces on the internet where people who never would have community, perhaps in person, for example, or don't have the support in their neighborhoods or in their communities to actually come together.
Yeah.
How do you balance that or understand that with the problems of misinformation and disinformation that we are now confronted with?
Yeah. There are a multitude of answers, but one is maybe also from my own experience. I'm engaged in something called narrative management in conflict dynamics. That is a concept of how do we empower local communities in West Africa to counter destabilizing, hateful messages on the internet, on social media, which are really destabilizing West African countries, which are disseminating hate speech, fake news, and so on. And one of the concepts we have developed as a group is to empower local communities who are voiceless to find their own voice and to basically come up with their own narratives. Yeah. So, as I said, you have a lot of fake news out there, which are drowning out the good news. So what you have to do as a countermeasure is enabling all kinds of different actors to come together and produce their own real news, you know, or real information. And in my case, in West Africa, it's the question of how do we empower women groups, LGBTQI groups, faith leaders as well, but also, you know, environmental groups. How do we empower them to tell their side of the story, you know, so that you don't have only the powerful, you know, blurring out their line of thought, but you have local groups who can say, hey, wait a minute, this Chinese fish meal company is polluting our beach, you know, and you, government, give them license to produce fish meal on our shores, but you don't catch them when they pollute our beach. So do something, government. And here's the evidence, you know. So what I'm trying to say is, if only one person or one state or one company has a loud voice, you know, that's no good, because you have to have a plurality, again, a plurality of voices available. And the best thing, you know, you help oppressed and marginalized groups is to give them a voice and to teach them in how to use social media and bring out their own ideas. Because I recently was in Gambia and Ghana, and we did research this a little bit, and I tell you, everyone your age in Ghana has a mobile phone, a smartphone. Everyone. Yeah, They might not live in the United States and might not be rich as you, but they have a smartphone, and they are smart. You know, they can use it, and so, but how to, you know, come up with, for instance, a podcast, you know, they don't know how to do that. So if you teach them how to do a podcast, or how to verify your sources, basic journalism training, yeah, then you can create a network of trusted sources which can basically come up with good ideas and counter, for instance, Islamist narratives which are spreading around and destabilizing communities. Because what are these Islamists doing? They're using old frictions, for instance, present in these countries. Like, for instance, there is an old friction between herders who have goats and all kinds of animals roaming the pastures there, and you have farmers. And when you have goats going into the fields and eating the farmer's crop, you know, you have a conflict. And this is age old, yeah? But if you have two distinct communities, one tribe is the farmer, one tribe is the herder, you can actually very quickly, using social media, create tension. I'll give you an example. I was in Tamale, northern Ghana, and I was speaking to local leaders. We call them chiefs, and the supreme chief of Tamale was holding court, and so we went there and talked to him, and so he assembled all kinds of people to talk to us. And the interesting bit was that he told us a story, how quickly social media can produce problems. They told us the story of a young man, also a chief, who witnessed an injustice. What had happened? When you're in West Africa, you have when you have electricity, you know, some people are taking advantage of that. So they go there and steal a little bit of your electricity, you know? I mean, it happens. So you look at your building and say, oh, wait a minute, you know, I'm using a lot of electricity. Yeah, because your neighbor is also using some of it. So that happens all the time, yeah? It's a common thing. So the electricity company realized, oh, somebody is actually nicking some of the electricity here and not paying for it. So they called the police, and the police went in there, and they caught some young men who were actually trying to steal some electricity. And so they took out their batons and beat them up bad. You know, they got really a whooping. And so, you know, they had their heads bloody and so on. And the young chief was enraged and said, look what the police is doing. They made a video with his smartphone, you know, put that on Facebook, and he had a diatribe and said, well, tomorrow we're going to, you know, go to the electricity company, no violence, and so on. What happened is that the next day, thousands of young people stormed the electricity company, smashed everything, and the whole of Tamale, a city of 1 million, yeah, went dark. No electricity. Ziri, this terrible. I mean, I don't know how to stop her talking. I mean, it's crazy technology. Anyways, the whole of Tamale went dark. So one guy has a message, puts it on Facebook, it gets viral, thousands of people come together in one spot, and the whole thing gets out of control, completely out of control. And the chiefs told me, well, John, we would have loved to do something, to go, but we didn't know how to do that. You know, we didn't know how to do that. We would love to be able to reach our young people who are using these smartphones. and so I guess what I'm trying to say is, if you have to be you have to know what you're doing when you're using this technology, and just learning learning by doing is sometimes dangerous, and there easily people could have been killed in this rampage. Yeah, easily. There weren't. That was lucky. But this young man, this young chief, is still on the run, because if they get him, he gets a whooping. Yeah, and so, I guess what I'm trying to say is that we have to enable everyone to work responsibly with information, and that is not just done like that. You have to have kind of a little bit of training, how to deal in an ethical way with information, so that you do not put lives at risk, and that because no story is worth that somebody dies for it. Yeah, there are better ways of communicating and getting your organizing support for your cause, whether it's LGBTQ or whatever, farming or women's issues or youth issues. There's so many young people there, but they don't know what they do. They're not as lucky as you to have a good college and get a decent education and be able to learn things and learn from others. They are doing, and they're still using the technology. And so, yeah, sorry, I'm trailing off.
This is wonderful. I received a question from a student who would like me to read the question.
Sure.
So, in your 2020 documentary on freedom of speech on the internet, you've referenced the Arab Spring. With travels to Egypt, among other places, this person is wondering about your perspective on Middle Eastern North African studies and the Western Academy's grouping of the Middle East/North Africa, right? And making those experiences different from that of continental Africa, quote unquote. How does that geographic aspect of post-colonial scholarship fit into your work's framing of Black experiences in Europe and current structures of violence against Black Germans? Specifically, how does it inform activism and other efforts to privilege as many voices across the global diaspora as possible?
You can do a whole course on this. First, you have to acknowledge that when we look at the geography today and how countries are composed, the borders, that they are colonial borders. I think it was 1880 something when here in Berlin, at the Berlin Africa Conference, the globe was divided into countries and basically was divided up between the big powers. Even the US got colonies there, and they were sitting at the table in Berlin, the US. So these are colonial borders, okay? Which bears a lot of problems today, because you had divided whole, ethnic groups from one another. Straight lines hold through Africa to Sub-Saharan Africa. You look at the borders and you see this is not natural. A lot of problems. But what these borders did is they were destroying age-old, let's say, age-old relationships on the African continent. There was a strong relationship between Arabs and Sub-Saharan Africans, and mainly was also informed by the slave trade. So lots of Arabs went down to the south of the Sahara, and were on raids and captured slaves and brought them to places as far as the Ottoman Empire, Istanbul and stuff like that. So in particularly West Africa, Arabs are seen not necessarily always favorable, yeah, because there is a long history, and Black Africans realize Sub-Saharan Africans know their history, and so there is still friction there, or mistrust between Sub-Saharan Africans and, for instance, the MENA countries, we call them now, yeah, the Middle Eastern countries. I traveled the Middle East quite a bit, Morocco, Egypt, Iraq, Jordan, and to extent, if you want to say Turkey as well, Turkey, how to say that? It is there is some racism, Arab racism, towards Black people. At least I experienced that. It is how to say it, and it is informed by the Arab history. You know, Black people were slaves in the Arab courts. You know, they were slaves, and so how to say that? And today, you when you go to Arab countries, you still feel that a little bit. But when I did that in a piece in Egypt, it was on the Arab Spring and how Egyptians were trying to break loose from the shackles of their dictator, and they're trying to gain freedom. And that's the same everywhere in the world. People want to be free. They really want to be free. They want to speak their mind. They want to be able to do something. And that's no different in an Arab country or in a Sub-Saharan African country. Everyone wants to be free and tell their own story. There needs to be a closer discussion on what it means to be North African and Sub-Saharan African, and what is the relation between Northern African and Sub-Saharan African countries. That is not yet all finished. It was papered over by European colonialism, but there needs to be a discussion in these countries. What is their historical responsibility here? Yeah, so that's only a subsection of what the question was. Yeah, colonization practices learned from the French. Yeah. True. But what was the other question again? Your friends Arab Spring, we traveled to Egypt, place for MENA studies. Yeah. And Western Academies grouping of Middle East. Yeah. Well, I mean, I've when I was at your age, I went to Paris and I did an internship with an immigrant press agency called Agence Immédiat, and they were run by young beurre, as the French call them. You know, there's a saying, black blanc beurre. So in the French idea, Africans are there as a group, and then you have the whites as a group, and you have Arabs as a group, yeah. And the beurre were the offspring of the Arab countries who speak French, like for instance Morocco, Tunisia, Algeria, and a lot of them migrated to France, and they were kind of the underlings, undercast of the French society, and even sometimes more than Black people. I mean, when you have a hierarchical situation, you would have the whites on top, then you would have the Asians, then you would have the Blacks, then you would have at the bottom the Beurre, the Arabs. And I went to do this work in this agence immédiat, and it was really interesting to see how they came, they've informed their liberation struggle, and they connected to people who were fighting anti-Semitism and people, because, in this group, for instance, I lived in Belleville in the 20e arrondissement in Paris, and you had on the Boulevard Belleville, you had a boucherie, so butchers, yeah? And you had one from Algeria, and the other one was also from Algeria, right? You have two, butchers next to each other. Yeah, well, the one was killing the cows halal, and the other one was killing the cows kosher. So, because they were from the bloody same village, excuse my French, they were from the same village, but one was Jewish and the other one was Muslim. And so they had the same kind of culture. And in the 1980s and 90s, when you had a backlash against French racism, people came together, like people of SOS Racisme came together with people who were organizing on behalf of the Beurre, and so I was in the midst of that, and it was really interesting to see how the struggle, was similar in different communities. So it's a real hard question. How does it inform? I'm wondering about your perspective on MENA studies and Western academies grouping of the Middle East, North Africa, and making those experiences different from that continental Africa. Well, there are differences between Sub-Saharan Africa and the MENA countries, absolutely. Not only language, but culturally, religiously, there are big differences. And I hope I could answer that question. I have to think about that a little bit more, I have to say. Yeah, sorry, that's not even convincing me as an answer. Sorry. Yeah.
Awesome. Who else has a question?
Who?
Carson, yeah, go.
Carson, okay.
Awesome. Hi, thank you so much. I really enjoyed your talk on Friday, your willingness to share in your vulnerability.
Sure.
And to shift gears, I have a little bit more questions, just kind of more about you. Specifically, because we're all language learners here, I am wondering what experience did you have learning English that maybe had you rethink German, specifically when you were referring to the Black American culture that you were able to learn from when you were exploring your own identity as Black German? Yeah.
So to get me, what was the concrete question? What I learned?
Did you have any experiences learning English that made you rethink the German language as your first language?
I think English is a wonderful tool I can use everywhere in the world. English is nowadays lingua franca, as was French 200 years ago or 300 years ago in Europe, or Latin even 2 millennia ago. People were always using one language as the language to communicate on a larger scale. And to me, English was really a godsend, because suddenly you could speak to all kinds of people who could not speak your mother tongue. In my own family, I had my father remarried in Sweden, and I have siblings in Sweden I can't talk to in Swedish. We talk in English. So it is a perfect tool to go around. But English is fairly easy, I think. You can handle it pretty easy. Other languages are more complex. And wow, the German has so much depth in terms of poetry, for instance. Wow, you know, that's really, really cool. If you're a poet and you read poems in German, this is amazing. Goethe, Schiller, Mai Ayim, one of my friends, who was a real good poet, Black German poet. I can only recommend her work to your students, to all of you. Read Mai Ayim, A-Y-I-M, M-A-Y-A-Y-I-M, Mai Ayim. She has published a couple of poetry in German and in English. And she killed herself, unfortunately, 25 years ago. But she was a good friend, and she was such a powerful Black German poet. And I can only recommend you to read her in German and then in English, because you have both next to it. And because it's really amazing what you can do with the German language. And I like my mother tongue. It's a sometimes complicated, but it's a cool language. And 100 million Europeans speak German, yeah, more than 100 million. And so I think it's really good for you to speak German. It's one of the major European languages, particularly if you're interested in reading or doing something like philosophy or so, something like that. I just read an interesting piece this morning. That's actually in English. It's the Philosophical Quarterly, yeah, and it's from 2007, and it's Kant's Second Thoughts on Race, yeah, because recently I realized that Immanuel Kant, one of the biggest philosophers of enlightenment, really had some disparaging words to say about Black people. And I thought, what? I learned him in school and I adored the guy. And now I realize 20 years later, because when I went to school, nobody told me, this guy had some really, really nasty stuff to say about Black people. But what I also didn't know is that you know, doesn't excuse it, but you know, I'm happy to report that in what was it, 1795, around that, he had a change of heart, and he expunged quite a bit of his racism from his philosophy, because he realized that what he was saying earlier was complete nonsense. So I guess what I'm trying to do is, I read that in English. I have to find the German original text, but because, you know, I speak German, I can read it, and it's I want to read that in the original, and that gives so much joy. So Carson, I hope I touched at least on a little bit on what you wanted to know. Sorry. Olivia, come on. Now you tell me something. Tell me something about you and say something, you know?
Okay. Hi, I'm Olivia. I really enjoyed watching your documentaries that Dr. Fraser Ross posted for us. I found it really interesting that your son works with you with your documentaries and films. And so I was wondering, how has the German society changed in its acceptingness of Blackness compared to your generation versus his? Are there things that have improved or gotten worse?
No, I think they have improved in general. It's not the same as in the 1960s when I was born. You know, when I went to school, I was, you know, living with my white mother and my white grandmother, my white grandfather, uncles and nieces, all white. And my African side, I didn't explore, you know, until I was 21, your age. So I had no idea basically what this African side of me would would be. And I was always the only one in school, in kindergarten, in school, in high school. You know, I was the only Black person with my sister Rita. And only in the last year of high school that changed. Last 2 years of high school that changed. That is not the case today, at least in this city in Berlin. There are, of course, the smaller cities with, you know, which are predominantly white. There might be that you go into school and you're still the only one, but even in the small cities today, you know, you more likely not to be the only one, the only Black person there. So, you know, when my son Josh went to school, he was one of 5 Black German kids in one classroom. And that was a complete sea change. Attitudes have changed. There are more and more interracial marriages. You know, you have in Berlin, nobody cares. You know, not really. I mean, there are some Nazis, but I mean, I wouldn't go to where is it now? Was it Wisconsin? I think so, or Milwaukee or something like this. But realize, because, you know, they shoot Black people in their own homes there, you know. I just heard, you know, I read this morning about a case of somebody was sleeping in his own couch, you know, no knock warrant. The police went in and shot him to death. No, my children are afraid when I go to the United States. You know, they think, oh no, Papa, don't go, you know. They're all crazy. But I have to tell them that no, they're not all crazy. It's a beautiful country. It's really, really nice. And I've met so many nice people in the United States, but quite a few, you know, Germans are thinking twice, you know, whether they would go to the United States or not.
John, looks like we're going to have to call you back again to answer all of our questions, because our time is up for today. Our students' class time is over.
Oh my goodness. So
yeah.
you have another 5 minutes? Come on.
Go on.
Okay. So I don't want to end this by, you know, without saying that it's great fun to talk to you. And these kind of events are the events which we need in order to understand each other a bit more. You know, I told you that my kids are afraid that I go to the United States. You know, I go there regularly. But it's not only part of my work. I like actually going there. Not only because the crab cakes in Baltimore are just amazing. You know, I love it. But it's really, I've met so many good-natured, really good people in the United States. They far outnumber the locals, the crazy people I've seen there in the United States. You know, so you know, I don't think I need a gun when I travel the US. Yeah, but still, this is we need to talk to each other. We need to learn languages. We need to be able to put ourselves in the other's position in order to live a fuller life. You know, it's not only altruism. It's because, you know, just because you want to live a fuller life, you have to be able to understand your opposite number. You know, who maybe speaks Chinese or Indian languages or African languages, you know, I mean, but it's interesting. The world is a big place. It's beautiful. It has so much to offer, and you are just about realizing this. And what you're doing by learning, for instance, another foreign language is to give you the tools to explore the world in a way which is more meaningful than if you just hope that your opposite number speaks your language. Yeah. So I strongly encourage you to learn languages. Go out, take your professors and force them to go with you to Berlin and say, hey, we want to have a real real trip. We want to be really exposed to German and go to the Oktoberfest and see Berlin and travel. Man, you have to do that, because then you realize you get an ear for that. You won't learn the language only in the US. You have to be here to do that, and the good thing is you don't have to pay tuition if you study in Germany. Don't have to do that. You can do your masters and don't pay money for it. Think about that. Yeah, I mean, and we need good people. So that's also another thing. We want to kind of take the brain drain and get people from you over here. I'm much more comfortable to have you over here than some other folks from the US. So it's a cool situation. Learn languages. Yeah, please do. And then next time we can talk in German personally.
So we'll see you then in Berlin at the end of May, because we're going to Berlin at the end of May.
You do? Yeah. How cool is that? Really? You all going? Who's coming? Who's coming?
All the students except for Jess, but maybe Jess, you join German and then you come another time, right?
Oh, is that allowed? Can I promise them a beer?
Yes.
Well, so I promise you all a good German beer. Everyone, you can drink it with me, and we make selfies and send them to your parents.
Wir freuen uns darauf.
Yeah, because I mean, there's non-alcoholic beer as well, which is quite good. But the real thing, we can do that. So end of May, where am I? End of May, I should be here. So I'm going to Ireland now for a short reportage. For 10 days, I will be in Ireland, and then I'll be back. I should be here. Yeah, we should do that, and that's perfect because the weather is much better now. It's drab and cold, and yeah, but the weather is nice and flowers are out, and that's good. Cool. When are you coming? When you Rosemary, you sent me the dates.
We will.
Great to have you. And maybe if you want, I can bring you together with some students.
That would be incredible.
Yeah, because we have some students here close to where I live, in the university, SRH University. Some of my students are there, so it would be nice to maybe team up and have you guys come together, and because you rather want to talk to your age group than to all of us. Yeah, I can imagine. At least when I was your age, I would have done that.
Well, thank you so much, John. And we'll turn things over to Dr. Pena to close us out here.
Okay.
Yes, we look forward to seeing you in Berlin. But for now, in closing, I'd like to express my sincere appreciation once again to John and also to Sonia for joining us. A special thank you to Emily, our students, and to Davidson College for making so many important conversations possible. Today's recording will soon be among the others on our YouTube channel. So if you missed Friday's event, it's at the top of our All Black Lives Matter playlist. Please join us from February 17th to the 20th, 2022, when the 5th BGHRA conference will be hosted virtually by Africana Studies at Rutgers University, Camden. The conference will not only honor Black History Month, but importantly celebrates the 10th anniversary of the BGHRA. Our theme is All Black Lives Matter, Black Germany and Beyond, and registration is now free and open at tinyurl.com/BGHRA 2022. Visit our website at bghra.org for details. Proceeds from any purchases at our conference swag shop will support Black German artists and our graduate student-led initiatives. And don't forget to subscribe to our newsletter and YouTube channel, and to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. A new series of events, Black Germany and Beyond, will commence right after the conference, so please stay tuned. We hope that you've enjoyed today's conversation. And again, until next time, we thank you for your time and attention.